Welcome back, comedy fans. Well, you know I love diving deep into your TV obsession, so I asked you, what British sitcoms do you absolutely love or totally despise? Out of hundreds of replies, one show kept popping up: Allo Allo. This classic British sitcom that aired on BBC One back in 1982 and ran for 9 hilarious and sometimes controversial seasons transported us to Nazi-occupied France during World War II. Created by the brilliant minds of David Croft and Jeremy Lloyd, it's famous for unforgettable characters and an incredible cast, but let's be real, it also got a lot of flack for its over-the-top stereotypes and making light of a pretty serious time in history. In this video we're going to unpack all of it. What made you laugh, what made you cringe, and why the show still sparks so much debate. The show was mostly set in the Café René in the fictional German-occupied town of Nouvion. It was run by René Artois, his wife Edith, and 2 waitresses. Originally Yvette Carte Blanche and Maria Recamier, who was later replaced by Mimi Lebonc. René's mother-in-law, Madame Fanny, lives with them, and for a majority of the time she is bedridden in her attic bedroom. So, to summarise, we have British actors doing faux French accents, waitresses in short skirts and stockings, 2 English airmen with exaggerated posh accents, more actors speaking with German accents who are understood by the French characters, at least 1 camp character, and an SS officer that we will later discover has a penchant for wearing lingerie complete with suspenders and black stockings. One of the most often praised aspects of the show is the well-played farce, physical comedy and visual gags. For example, Madame Fanny is startled by the flashing bed knobs that illuminate when the radio is receiving a transmission from London. She then has the indignity of having her bed lifted up to reveal the radio set under the bed and the speaker hidden underneath her chamber pot. There are frequent occasions when something has to be discreetly passed between different parties, like the Van Clomp painting of the fallen Madonna with the big boobies, and its fake copies. They are hidden in several knockwurst sausages, which themselves have to be concealed by shoving them down the men's trousers. Now, for many viewers, Allo Allo brings a sense of nostalgia and serves as a form of comfort viewing. It conjures up childhood memories of warm and cosy times for those who grew up watching it. The show has been described as great for when you don't want to have to think hard about anything, much like a lot of comedy on TV. The familiarity and escapism is particularly enjoyed in times of political or social uncertainty. However, the very repetition that initially contributed to the show's charm eventually became a source of disapproval. What began as playful for the audience could over time devolve into humour that felt stale. This highlights a common challenge in long-running sitcoms. What starts as a strength in a series can transform into a weakness. There is a delicate balance between the comfort factor and creative innovation. The setting of Allo Allo in Nazi-occupied France during World War II, a period of immense suffering and historical significance, is a principal feature that divides opinion. The show lampooned the tropes of serious BBC dramas like Secret Army, from which many of Allo Allo's archetypes were derived. The show's buffoonery is seen by some as disrespectful of the courage, selflessness and the loss of life of brave citizens in the war. The French resistance in particular is often portrayed as, oh what a funny resistance, with its members frequently driven by self-preservation and personal gain rather than ideological commitment. René constantly struggles to walk a fine line between resistance and collaboration, driven by self-preservation, which can be seen as a comedic, albeit unflattering, portrayal of human behaviour under duress. Conversely, critics say that, regardless of intent, the comedic treatment of such a sensitive historical period is in bad taste. They argue that the show trivialises the war. They would point to exaggerated cultural stereotypes and the simplification of the complex political realities of the French resistance. For them, certain historical events are simply too sacred or traumatic to be subject to light-hearted comedic treatment, especially when it simplifies complex realities or relies on stereotypes. Allo Allo employs exaggerated cultural stereotypes of French, German, Italian and British characters. This is evident in the characters speaking English with exaggerated foreign accents, such as Officer Crabtree's famously mangled French. The French characters are frequently depicted as randy, cowardly and prone to affairs, while the Germans are often portrayed as humourless, kinky and officious. The British characters, particularly the downed airmen, are depicted as stupid. Keen viewers of the show argue that this use of stereotypes is intended as tongue-in-cheek humour and a form of parody. It is clear that the show appears to take the mickey out of absolutely everybody without fear or favour, and that its humour is irreverent and satirical. The suggestion is that the show was sending up the stiff upper-lip films depicting the war rather than the nationalities themselves. The differing views on these stereotypes illustrate the double-edged sword of this comedic approach. While stereotypes were a central comedic trope, they also risk perpetuating harmful biases. Critics and some contemporary viewers find these stereotypes offensive or inappropriate, while some scholars acknowledge that the show might have aimed to be a programme about stereotypes simply than being stereotypical. The bluntness and exaggeration of the portrayals are now seen as problematic. A significant portion of Allo Allo's humour is derived from sexual innuendo. Female characters, particularly the waitresses Yvette, Maria and Mimi, are frequently depicted as bosomy and randy, engaging in affairs with René and even offering the Germans sexual favours in exchange for commodities like petrol and sugar. Their names are noted to literally embody the sexual humour. Yvette Carte Blanche, Mimi LeBlanc, and Maria Rachamier. The Guardian critic said, "There are so many things I dislike most about Allo Allo. The hilarious names of some of the characters. Mimi LeBlanc, Fanny LaFan, just in case we didn't find the actual script funny enough." Although he misnamed Madame Fanny and misspelled LeBlanc. This comedic style is often defended as light-hearted seaside postcard humour. It is claimed that it's part of the show's broader farcical style and not meant to be taken seriously. This approach is common in British comedy of the era, relying on bawdy situations for laughs. Some contemporary critics note that some female characters are portrayed as sex objects purely for the pleasure of men. The frequent innuendo and depiction of waitresses as prostitutes have been identified as reinforcing outdated gender roles. Additionally, some recent viewers have described the dynamic between René and his wife concealing his multiple affairs is described as a problematic power dynamic by some recent viewers. The show's reliance on traditional bawdy and innuendo-driven humour, coupled with the objectification of female characters, gained broad popular appeal in its era, where such portrayals were largely unproblematic for many. However, with increased feminist and LGBT activism, these portrayals are now retrospectively criticised for their potential to perpetuate harmful norms. German tank commander Lieutenant Hubert Gruber is consistently portrayed as apparently gay and interested in René Artois. His advances towards René, combined with Guy Siner's facial expressions, were described as very funny. The character seems relatively open about his homosexuality within the context of the show. He even refers to his armoured car, an overtly masculine weapon, as "my little tank," in the same way someone might refer to a precious loved trinket. For some, his character, with his joyously camp lines, might have been viewed as a rare, albeit caricatured representation of a gay character in a mainstream sitcom of its time. However, the comedic use of Gruber's attraction to René is now seen as using a character's sexuality for comic awkwardness. A major issue arises from the series finale, when the flash-forward scene reveals that Gruber has eventually married Helga. This is interpreted by some as straightwashing of his character identity. This is in common with criticisms of how older comedies handled LGBTQ themes, often using them for comedic effect without genuine representation. While perhaps seen as progressive by some at the time, it is subject to criticism for its potential to trivialise or misrepresent queer identities. Not unlike many other TV sitcoms, Allo Allo is characterised by an abundance of repeating gags and catchphrases of the various characters that crop up in each and every episode. This includes Officer Crabtree's Gid moaning, Monsieur Leclerc, it is I, Leclerc, and Edith's famously bad singing. The plots frequently involve bizarre and complicated schemes that, with predictable comedic timing, invariably backfire. For many viewers, this repetition is part of the show's charm. This familiarity creates a comfortable and predictable viewing experience. Repetition is an inherent and effective element of farce, building comedic momentum through predictable absurdity. However, critics and a segment of the audience argue that these repetitive gags become stale in later seasons. While there are fans of the show who find it funny throughout its entire 9-season run, a consensus among many viewers and critics points to a noticeable decline in the show's quality in later seasons. This decline is often pinpointed around season 5 or 6, with some reviews specifically noting a significant drop-off by the 8th series. Critics say the unique X factor that made the show charming largely evaporated. Humour became coarsened and rote, and jokes were not as funny or varied. A significant factor cited for this decline is the departure of co-creator David Croft after season 6. The implication is that his absence as primary director and co-writer meant that the new team struggled to recapture that indefinable lightness that characterised earlier seasons. Additionally, Gordon Kay, who played Rene, suffered serious head injuries in a car accident after season 6. The production team had to halt filming and wait for his return. This left a 15-month gap between the broadcast of Series 6 and Series 7. Changes in the supporting cast, such as the introduction of the Italian commander and the departure of Captain Hans Geering, were also mentioned as points where the show's dynamic shifted, potentially impacting overall quality. Some commentators criticised the show for replacing actors in several roles where they passed away or just decided to leave the show. There were 3 Ernest Leclercs, 2 Otto Flicks, and 2 Captain Alberto Bertorelli. The show consistently enjoyed high popular appeal, achieving significant viewership figures. Customer reviews on platforms like Amazon for VHS and DVD sales are overwhelmingly positive. However, it was generally looked down on by snooty critics who thought it in poor taste, and has generally been thoroughly criticised by scholars for its problematic tropes. This divergence is common when a show is designed to appeal to a very specific subculture, for example, mass audience seeking light entertainment, which critics, by their professional mandate, might not share the same evaluation criteria. The increasing application of content warnings on streaming services and the ongoing debate over whether the show would be commissioned today directly reflect evolving social sensitivities regarding stereotypes, gender, sexuality and historical representation. The ability to laugh at the British, the French and the Germans without causing an international incident for some viewers stands in sharp contrast to the discomfort felt by those reminded of the real-world prejudice of historical trauma. A large part of the audience loves Allo Allo for its entertainment value and the comfort of familiarity, often overlooking its potentially problematic elements. Conversely, critics and academics, by their very nature, engage in deeper textual analysis, scrutinising themes and representations and societal implications. Their focus is often on the show's impact and underlying messages rather than just its immediate comedic effect. The show's creators' stated intent to just entertain aligns more closely with the audience's reception, creating a significant disconnect with those who seek more from cultural products. The phenomenon is not unique to Allo Allo and is a recurring theme in media studies, underscoring the ongoing challenge of reconciling a work's popular success with its potential for problematic messaging. I really hope you've enjoyed this dive into the love it or hate it world of Allo Allo. Which side are you on? Let me know your comments in below. I'm genuinely curious to know what you think, and while you're there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video so you don't miss out on more TV, sitcom stories and trivia. Thanks for watching.